Yes.
Jacobs? Yes, sir?
I did.
Okay. Would you like to share that with us?
Sure. They actually both, there were themes in both of them. So my wife was diagnosed with cancer,
Okay.
appendix cancer with no known treatment protocol, and so that, and my son, who has Asperger's, we ran out of schools to go to in Michigan. Like, he was excused from 4 of them. So in both cases, I decided to stay home, and I spent 9 months at home with my wife, going to Qigong master and a bunch of other things, and taking care of my kids. And I wrote down, I said, I actually think that they were smart and right decisions. I mean, like, that was actually, if I sit back and I look, I go, that was a good decision. And I came out of that saying I was pleased that I behaved in a way that I thought I was the person of, right? I mean, it was like some confirmation. And the other one was when we moved to California, and we moved because of Aaron's challenges, and my wife and I decided I was taking a shirt out of a suitcase and hanging it on a hanger, and we said, well, there's nothing left here, you know, like, and she said, well, you know, he had been out to California for some diagnosis. She's like, well, why don't we move out to LA? And I put the shirt on hanger, and before I put the hanger on the hook, said, sure, yeah, let's do that. And then we did, and everybody looked at it like, wow, big thing that we're doing. And it was like, again, it was like, well, that was just a smart, right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we were better for it, and just like in the first story, we were better for it. And that was another situation where it was like, good, I would hope that I would respond that way in that situation. So they're both very affirming for me in terms of the transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see where that was. Anyone else?
Can I ask?
Of course.
How was your wife doing?
Fine,
Okay.
absolutely
Okay.
fine, 20 years later,
Okay.
and yeah,
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
thank you for asking.
I'll share one or two.
Okay.
I think one of the first things that was a really big influence on me was 9/11. I was working, it was my first couple of years really working, and I was working at a very fast-paced, 80-hour-a-week almost type job, and my husband was teaching at the time. We did not have kids, and I don't even think we had our dog yet. We just had our home, and that was it. And I
Pre-dog.
just felt like life was literally about getting up in the morning, going to work, getting home, and on the weekends we'd go spend a couple $100 at Target, and then we would start all over again. I remember my husband calling me in the summertime, when are you gonna be home, when are you gonna be home, because he would be off or tutoring. And then 9/11 hit, and he was in a school at the time, and if you remember, all the schools were shut down, and you had to stay in your rooms, and it was very just a traumatizing thing. And I was at the advertising firm that I worked at, and we were working on.
Was that in New York?
No, I was here in Sligo. I worked for Hart Associates, and we were working on something for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And they're like, well, we have to keep working, we have to keep doing this. And I'm thinking to myself, do you really think the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is gonna care about these ads after all of that? And that was really perspective changing for me. And it was shortly afterwards that we got our dog, and then that much shorter afterwards that we had our first child, because I felt like there had to be a little bit more meaning to life. So that was a really pivotal thing. And of course, I think having kids in general was very, with each one too, was a very different perspective change.
And may I ask how many children you
I
have?
have 3.
3. I would say that is the parenting, becoming a parent is a very common transition in life. Did you have anything you'd like to share with us, Barbara?
I would agree. I mean, becoming a parent, I was pretty much a single parent. I didn't know that, but I was, and you know, so that brought on a whole host of things. But I think one of the most pivotal things for me was a little bit later, while I was at Root, so I'd gone through the OD program in home ed, and I had 2 friends die. Both a little younger than I am, but they were both 58. One I had known since she was 8.
Mm.
And I just thought, you know, I like the work I do, but life is too short, right? I mean, these were phenomenal people, high esteem in their chosen profession, gave it everything they had and more, and they were no longer there. So I just sort of picked up, I want to be one of those people who's giving all they can to something that really matters, not just corporate life. So that was a big transition.
So it's like discovering that there's more in life, there's more in life to work. Shane, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, two things. One, and I've shared it with my students over at BG. Back, I was 37, and I had just quit my life in Boston, and it was about to begin the PhD program at Case Western. And I owned a home in Boston, and I was downstairs in the basement packing up. You've heard the story, and you may have heard the story as well. I was packing up, and I found an essay that I had written when I was 12 years old.
Mm.
And it talked about what I was going to do when I grew up. And it said, when I grew up, well, not only did it predict the kind of school that I was going to go to, but it said, when I grow up, I will get my PhD and teach. And it was exactly 25 years later that I was doing it, and I started reading this and I started crying. And so that's one thing that had really motivated me in moving towards, I mean, I haven't looked back at all from once I began that journey. But the other thing, and even now that I'm sitting here reflecting on it, I can see more and more the connections. I think I was so moving once I had recognized that I was meant to be a teacher, and I was doing everything. I was consulting and teaching and writing. And 10 years ago, well, actually at this point, 11 years ago, back in the summer, I had a stroke, such that my whole right side was gone, and I was immobile, and I lost any capacity to communicate. I lost any capacity. It just goes from there. And what we found out was that I have a disease called moya, M-O-Y-A. And what it is, it's how the blood flows up into the brain and it splits off and it feeds both sides of the brain. And they think that I had my first occurrence back when I was a child, which probably caused one of the residuals, and I never knew this, was my stuttering and my speech distortion. But the other thing, so on one side it was able to reroute itself, and so it was able to, this side was able to continue on. This side, the blood in my head dispersed like a puff of smoke, which is what moya means in Japan, Japanese. Anyway, so I went in. It was now the Monday after Thanksgiving, 06, and I went in for 10 hours of brain surgery.
Mm.
Yeah, and to be honest, I've been told that moya, the opportunity of getting it is 1 in 2 million. So I too should go and buy a lottery ticket. And so that was, by the time I was able to begin to, I mean, they didn't even know if I could, live on my own, never mind go back to teaching. Anyway, and then 6 months later, they found that I had breast cancer, and I had a double mastectomy. So tying it back to recognizing that I was always meant to be a teacher, it's really forced me, and I've been told this by many people who knew me before and know me now, it has really forced me to slow down and to become a lot more thoughtful, a lot more introspective, a lot more caring and tender. And so that's what I'm showing here on my diagram. That I mean, things have happened since then still, but if you think about it, 10 years ago, they figured I would be best I would be best served living in a, living out my life in a nursing home. And fortunately, I ended up with a doctor in Boston. He was part of Harvard Medical School, to be honest with you. And he's the one who did the surgery. And knock on wood, I continue to improve daily.
Right.
Daily.
Daily, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So,
First of all, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for sharing those stories with all of us here in the room.
Wow.
And it really is exactly the kind of thing that I saw in the interviews, right? So we all have these occurrences. They're basically called, Bennis and Thomas describe them as crucible moments. So it's an event that you go through, and as you go through, it actually transforms who you are. Even if it affirms the person that you want to be, it gives you your ability back, shows you, both of you, that there's more to life than work, right? There are these events that have a transformative effect on the person and they're occurring. So how do you think these events influence your leadership style?
I think, it influenced by helping you understand there are human issues and concerns in addition to whatever the business issue or model is, or, what you're trying to achieve. That the humanness is not even just a vital part, it is the way business life happens.
Right. It's how we get work done.
That's how we get work done.
So each one of these experiences influences the leadership style. And then we think about this idea of, are your stories positive or negative? And every single one of you told positive story, right? So you said that was the right choice at the time. I was reminded. I knew there was more to life than work, and I continue to improve daily. And so these are positive stories. And they've actually found that that makes a difference, whether you tell a positive story or a negative. So we're going to this idea of narrative identity development, right? So our lives are storied. This is how we make up our identity. They are stories that we tell ourselves. They are not always true, right? Sometimes they're the best version of ourselves. Sometimes they're the worst version of ourselves. But they're that tape that keeps playing over and over again that helps define for us who we are, right? One of my favorite philosophers, Jay-Z, right? He says, you have to understand your past so that you can use it as a foundation to grow, right? So when we take the time to self-reflect, we can surface these stories and decide, is this still who we are? Is this still what we're all about? Is this still really what we want to bring to the table? So this is really how we get our identity, are these stories that we've experienced and how we tell ourselves. And I think it's really important that the stories can heal or cripple the individual, depending on what sort of story it is and how often you tell it and what you're telling you to yourself while you're doing it. So now that gets us into our participants for this study. I had the distinct pleasure of sitting down with 5 business leaders in the Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland area.
how'd you find them?
Well, I started with the Conscious Capitalism group of Northeast Ohio. They gave me 2 names. I was able to get in touch with both those people, and then my P2 opened up his address book and shared a whole bunch more names with me. So I ended up with 19 names, 12 that I made contact with, and I had to turn a couple men away because I had enough men already.
Okay.
And in the end, I ended up with 5. So they wanted me to have 3 to 4, but I ended up with a 3-1 split, male to female, and so I decided to take the 5th female to kind of balance out the population a little bit. So, time commitment to the conscious leadership or conscious capitalism. I had 2 that were less than 5 years, 2 that were between 5 and 15
What do you mean
years.
time commitment to?
So how long that they had known about and been following the philosophy. So the person
So
who
they actually knew
was,
about conscious capitalism?
yeah, they're practicing it in their businesses. So the person who felt as though she had been practicing this for longer than 15 years was like, this just used to be called simple trust. She's like, it's been through so many evolutions since then, but basically, I think she was in her very early 60s. She said, since I became the president of this organization at the age of 36, I have been running my operations this way. So she had actually been doing it for the longest. You will see that other than one participant, really all of my participants were about middle-aged, right? So the kind of time in our life when we start to question what are we all about and what are we here for, that sort of thing. So just so you have an idea of who these people were, and I wanted to share with you their crucible moments. I was truly humbled by what these participants felt that they wanted to share and could share and were willing to share with me in the interviews and also in the assessments. I honestly, kind of like Jim was saying earlier, I was floored by some of the things that they would share. And I knew that once I got that level of honesty, that I was really, touching on a nerve there and bringing something to light. So a lot of these things happen in combination. It's like, hey, you're not getting the memo yet. Hey, you're not getting the memo yet. Like, I think one of my participants had the choosing life over certain death, overcoming workaholism, industry market crashes, and divorce, all in 2008 and 2009. And that was the moment that he decided. Now, he was already aware of this philosophy, was kind of practicing, but that was what really cemented it and pushed it over the line for him, that he really needed to be more than just, a typical leader.
Before you change the slide,
Okay, go ahead.
I'm curious, what's that picture?
It's hot steel. It's liquid,
Oh,
molten.
okay, I couldn't pick that up.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that, like any good professor, you have pictures that diagram or suggest what it is you're talking about.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good metaphor.
Because it really were fiery situations.
Yeah.
I mean, they were fiery situations for these people, and what they went through to get there. But so that brings me to the next question as a researcher. So what, Corrie? These things happen all the time. People get sick, people get divorced, people lose their mentors. These things happen all the time. Why these leaders, right? Why did they decide to choose this path when so many other leaders don't? So what I found from my study was that the very first thing was this idea of optimism. These leaders were optimistic, as confirmed by the results on the bar on EQ. The high range scores on this particular EQ assessment start at 109. These people were being rated by people around them in the 360s, anywhere from 117 to 125. So they were blowing out the high end of the optimism scores. And the coolest thing about optimism, right, is that it's something that we can learn to do. We can learn to find the silver lining in things. We can learn to change our mindset. We can learn these differences.
One thing, just as an FYI.
Okay.
Jim, who was just talking to us before, I was noting the way he was talking. He never used negative words.
Right.
It was always positive based.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? It is. It's true. So the other thing is that ties back to McAdams's work in terms of narrative identity development is whether or not you are narrating your life in a redemption sequence. I don't love that word redemption, but what that means is how did you go from bad to good, right? How did you take a bad situation, learn from it, grow from it, and find the good in it? So here we are again, back at the positivity, right? So you have this narrating and redemption sequences. And something else that I thought was really interesting is that every single one of the leaders in the study experienced others' generative behaviors, usually at a low point in their life. So generativity is when an adult, a healthy, developing adult reaches middle age, they start to ask questions like, how can I make my life count? Usually it has to become with becoming a parent, right? You become concerned for the next generation, you become concerned for supporting and developing that life. And so every single one of these leaders, one was given the president role at the company even though the gender norms at the time were not leaning in females' favor. Another one had a mentor who saw value in them even though that they were getting a divorce and everything was really messy and everything had just messed up. Another had a professor at Ohio State that had sat down with them and really worked with them, and they really felt that they wouldn't have their college education if it wasn't for the niceties of sitting down with this person. So this is something that they give back, right, in their organization. So they had these experiences, and now they're running their organization this way. They're developing people, they're focused on social responsibility, and they're bringing this all to bear on the leadership role. So that brings us to one of our final ideas and our final question. So Peter Senge, in the Fifth Discipline, 1990, he talks about this idea of the fundamental truth, right? So we get this through studying and constantly practicing. And that's really what these conscious leaders are doing, right? They're studying their own behavior, their own transformation, their human behavior in the workplace, and then they're constantly practicing and trying to improve this, and they're bringing this to bear on their organizations. Senge says that these mental models are really hard to surface sometimes. So we're talking about conscious awareness. Can we be aware, right? How aware can we be of the patterns in our thinking, and how can we break out of that? Crucible moments, turning points in a life, give you an opportunity to question whether or not those mental models are still of value to you. But of course, Senge says we can't really bring crucible moments into leadership development. I don't know how we would do that, but with critical ongoing self-reflection, you can surface these events or surface these mental models and see if they're still of value to you. So then I leave you with a question. So what's our role then, right? As the OD practitioner, what is our role in creating space, in cultivating transformation? You know, how do we then take this knowledge and bring it to bear on our clients and leadership development programs and training programs? So how do we do that?
Are you asking us?
Yeah, I'm
Oh.
asking you. Sure.
I'm looking at the bottom one, modeling and explaining the benefits of positivity. That's pretty much what I really try to do in all my classes. And that's one of the reasons why I'm self-censoring myself today, and as well as a lot of other days these days, because I'm finding that the other Jane every now and then shows up. And I want the new Jane to be here, so to speak. Because I really like her a lot.
Good.
Yeah.
I like her too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
She likes you.
Good. It's mutual. Yes,
So
Jane.
I have, in my work, I speak of helping people create their preferred future faster, right? Which is, I believe, always possible from a positivity standpoint, and the opportunities for dialogue become a challenge, because inherent in creating your future faster is that speed component. And so having the conversation is paradoxical to the speed. And so when I go in, like with Jane in that project, my part of that project was 30 days. And so anyway, it just struck me, the opportunities for dialogue, how to build those into the work that I'm doing, to have deep dialogues, because what she was describing, I mean, 4 hours, I mean, I was like, wow, where do your clients come from? You know, they sit for 4 hours and have a conversation, and then another, and so anyway, and there's more there, toward where I can lean into.
Right. And I think sometimes the opportunity presents by using our systems thinking and awareness to ask a critical question at just the right time. I spoke with Mona Kelly, who's the vice president of Coca-Cola, and she uses some of these techniques with her CEOs. And she does it just purely with questioning. They'll come and I want this new initiative and I want to do this and I want to get it implemented, and she's like, have you thought about the workers? Right? Have you thought about how this is going to resonate with them, asking them to do this in the last 15 days before Christmas? Just raising that awareness, right? What are we missing? What is not being thought of? And being willing to take that on as feedback, right? Because I think that that's hard for some leaders too. And we saw some of that with Jim's presentation. So that's really the first half of my study. But I wanted to leave you with the second research question. So really, I went over these crucible moments with these people to figure out what sort of life events push them in this direction. But then I also wanted to know, how do they stay conscious? Like, what do they do to continue developing in the role? And so the development aspects that I saw these 5 individuals practicing, this idea of mindfulness, authenticity, and then a relations-oriented leadership type.
Is this your?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you send it to us?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I haven't presented it to anyone yet.
I won't
Feedback
use it yet.
is,
I
oh,
won't use
okay,
it yet.
thanks. 2/24, 1 to 3 p.m. And then
When-
hopefully,
What,
February 24th from 1 to 3 p.m. is my defense.
what day is the 24th?
Friday.
Can I come?
Can you just pray for me? Yeah, sure. I guess everyone's invited now. I wasn't sure if I wanted
It's a
people there
party.
or not, but whatever.
You might need a bigger room.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'll get the auditorium.
Yeah, so.
You're lucky I can't be there.
Can't you ask me just questions today to practice?
Well, yeah, that's what no, it's not that I'm asking questions. I'm really working on a different version of this whole stuff, so I really
Yeah.
like what you've been talking about.
Awesome. So, one of the ideas about self-actualized people is that they're more present in reality, right? They're better able to see a clear picture of reality. So I got this idea of like seeing or perceiving reality, presenting in reality, and interacting with reality. That these are really 3 points that reinforce each other, and they're all bolstered by feedback. So the more clear and trustworthy feedback that you can bring into the system, and then either ignore, implement, augment, save for later, however you're going to do that, that you can continue to process improve as a leader. So this is probably the harder part of my study that the committee's going to give me a harder time about than the other half.
Because.
In what way? Because like.
Well,
how
because
did
they're
you
going to
come up
ask, well, why did you see this, and why is this there, and are you sure that you want all those components, or I think curiosity is part of integrity. I'm expecting questions like that, but yeah, these leaders were just so cool. They were so cool. If we had more of these leaders, who knows what we could do? Who knows what we could do? One of the guys out of Cleveland, every month they have a professional development plan and a personal development plan. And your personal development plan cannot have anything having to do with work on it. And it's like Google, they give them time and resources every single month to focus on a personal passion project. And he was like, when we implemented these personal development days and times and resources, he's like, productivity went through the roof. He's like, because then they're showing up and they're fueled and they're creative and they're ready to go and they're ready to give everything to the organization. Just doing some really terrific stuff.
Okay, so do you have, I'm just curious, data as to the bottom line impact of this type of thing?
Well, I don't have any specifics, right? Like before I was a conscious leader, these were our results, and now after. But I will say that all 5 of these companies are wildly successful. The one in Chicago just won Illinois' Psychologically Healthy Workplace Award it was not this year, but for a couple years ago. So they are doing, they're very successful companies. I wish I could tell you the 30% increase, right?
To me, like looking at these, because I think that the way you're gonna get more people to change to this type of perspective is to produce that bottom line number, and then
Right.
they'll say, oh, well, this may be something worth looking into,
Right. Exactly.
It exists.
It does
Yeah.
already.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Tell me
I've been
where.
trying
I'd
to.
love to know
Okay,
where
I've
that
been
is.
trying.
Impact index?
No, it's not. There's one of the authors is David Wolfe, Wolfe,
Oh,
right?
Wolf and Sistiota, Firms of Endearment.
Firms of Endearment, thank you. So Firms of Endearment is one place you can find it. The other thing that's interesting is that one of David Wolfe's partners went onto Wall Street, Rick Frazier, and he has Cosinity Advisors, which is his firm, and they invest only in conscious capitalist companies.
Yeah.
And they have, they beat the market return for the last several years.
Yeah, so that Simpson study from 2013 showed that it was a 15-to-1 over the S&P 500 that these
Right.
companies were performing.
Right, it's
Um,
good.
and one of the
15.
guys that I interviewed, yeah, 15, right? One of the guys I interviewed is in finance, mergers and acquisitions, and they're doing the same thing. They're only investing in organizations that are running on these values and running with this type of attention on their culture. So it's very different from typical business.
Hmm.
Very different.
I like it.
So, but thank you guys. No, you guys have any questions for me? No.
I have a suggestion for you.
Yes, tell me.
Okay, get rid of this defense thing, right? I mean, knock
Yeah.
that off. And then what I would do is I would write a book.
Yeah?
Yep, and I would use this model as the organizing principles for it. And I say that from experience, because my master's thesis I turned into a book.
Really?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so there, I mean, you've got a lot of good information, a lot of interesting information, and this is something that is, you know, I mean, like literally, you can put on a page and you can go to work and you can organize a book around it, and there's things that people can do to enhance their scores. You could get, you know, your profile, and I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you could do with this.
But
Thanks.
even
I really
before we're
appreciate
good,
that.
I would suggest this could make some good articles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Publish,
Yeah.
and to publish some articles too. Well, the space in the conscious capitalism space is wide open because everyone just assumes the conscious leader, right? It's like, okay, we've got this really developed person in the leadership role with full buy-in. Okay, what does that even mean, right? Who is this person, and how do we help get more people there? So the fact that it's focused specifically on conscious leadership within conscious capitalism also
Right.
makes it very, very unique. So, well, thanks. A book, more writing. Haven't done
All right,
enough
you
of
can
that
take a
yet.
week or two off.
Just
Corey,
a
and
week or
then,
two, a week or two. But yeah, Barbara, I can send these to you if you want them, and my email is at the end, so if you
Okay.
guys think of anything later, you're fully welcome to.
I think I wanted to make sure we could share this before she defended.
Mhm.
And she said we can't.
Cool, all right.